We are just about to start in a minute on Is It Time to De-Escalate My Polyamorous Relationship with Tara and Andre. Good morning, Andre.
Good morning, Tara.
How are you?
And an early happy birthday to you, which is tomorrow. So happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tara. Happy birthday to you. Yay.
Aw, thanks, Andre.
Hard to believe you're 27 already.
27 already.
Wow.
I really had fun with our little birthday celebration on the weekend.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was super fun, and I'm excited to continue all the fun. I'm at my friend's cottage, Lisa, and so I'm doing the live from here today, and then we're going to have a little, well, we've been having a birthday celebration here too, so I feel like it's like all birthday all the time.
Maybe we should celebrate your birthday for the whole year until the next one.
Ooh, that sounds like an amazing idea. I'm for that.
What could you do?
All right. Well, I'm excited about today's topic. It actually came up in conversation with one of my partners who told me that they were de-escalating a relationship. So, and then we coincidentally, you and I started talking about it on the weekend. So, yeah. So for everyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome to Mondays with Tara and Andre. I'm Tara, and I'm a relationship and awesomeness coach.
And I'm Andre. I am a psychotherapist, sex-positive psychotherapist.
Yeah. And we are the co-founders of the online community Let's Talk Polyamory. We have an Instagram of the same name. So if you're not following us, you should follow us there because we post some fun things there. And co-creators of our group program, Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery, which helps couples open in a way that's secure and healthy and allows them to keep the stability of their relationship and explore things that maybe they want to explore. And in fact, the people we've worked with, a lot of them, it's really strengthened their relationship. It's pretty exciting to see all of that.
Yeah, it sure is. So we're on Instagram and here, and then rumor has it we're also now on YouTube, or we've been on YouTube.
We are on YouTube, and probably some people are joining us from YouTube. So if you are on YouTube, you can also join our group, which has all kinds of extra content as well. So welcome to those people. So every week we come here live and share hot tips on how you can navigate your open or polyamorous relationship and have a great time, basically.
Have a great time de-escalating.
Yeah, well, this is an important topic. So before we jump in totally, we'd love to know from people in the comments. Oh, first, if you can hear us. So if you're watching us live, let us know, #live. If you're watching us in the replay, if you could put #replay and let us know. And would like to know if you have ever de-escalated a relationship.
De-escalated as opposed to simply breaking up, ghosting.
Yeah, because I think, this is the interesting thing is that I think prior to becoming polyamorous, I thought that there was basically two options. So break up or stay together. There wasn't kind of a middle ground. And I think that's polyamory I think allows for that sort of opportunity. And I sent this in the email this morning, but I really loved this little, it won't show up as a GIF here, thing from Carrie from Sex and the City that says, like, if you break up, where does the love go?
Good question.
If you still love someone, is there another option? And basically that's what we're talking about today.
So it needn't be an all or nothing kind of deal.
Yeah.
Maybe we can
what do you think? Do you think, have you de-escalated a relationship? Maybe you didn't use that term. I certainly haven't used that term before.
Yes, I have. And I was also not aware at the time that it was being de-escalated. We didn't use that term, but we did make a modification to the relationship. And it was It was easier than I thought it would have been in some ways. And again, the key of that was because we did talk about it. We did speak openly about it. So we can get into that a little bit later, a little bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah. What about yourself? What's your experience been like with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a common thing, and I think again we're going to talk about it later, where you go like, oh, let's break up, but can we be friends? But there's really not any discussion about that, and I think a lot of the times it's a hard thing to do,
Mhm.
because it's hard. I think sometimes that it's the time to break up with someone, but may not, but then don't know what the other option is. I certainly didn't know the other option, so if they're not like, oh, let's be friends, or if they didn't allow me the opportunity to say like, hey, let's stay connected, because for some people it's too hard too, like that's the other
Right.
part. um
That, yeah, that's an interesting point, right? Because you and I might be in a relationship, and then I might say, or you might say to me, maybe we need to modify this, maybe we need to kind of de-escalate it. But you invite me to remain friends, and maybe I feel rejected or hurt by it, and it is difficult for me to have these still strong, intense feelings for you, and only be your friend. So sometimes we're resistant to it,
yeah.
but we might actually really want to remain connected, right? Where does that love go? Do we want to maintain that? And could we? So we
Yeah.
make that invitation to the other person, but we also respect if it is difficult for them to do it. But then if they are not wanting to participate in it, what are they left with? Do they get that all or nothing kind of feeling, right? So either they're in
Mhm.
it or they're out of it.
Yeah, I've definitely
Mm.
been in that all or nothing situation. So,
Mhm.
so I mean, I think it's important to put a definition, because actually, when we posted the topic, someone said, "What does it mean to de-escalate a relationship?" Because I mean, I think it's a pretty new-ish term, and maybe it's not something that flows around in monogamy circles, maybe, but
Mhm.
um, de-escalating is when you reduce the level of intimacy or connection in a relationship. Like that's a very general, I'd say, definition.
Intimacy, the reduction of intimacy, connection, or commitment.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so it can be intentional and consensual, like two people come together and say, hey, let's change the nature of our relationship. Or it can be sudden or unexpected, initiated by one person.
Mhm. So I'm wondering if, given this idea, the newness of it for us, but if we were aware of this before, is it something that we should introduce in our relationship as we start to hang out? So we say, we start seeing each other, we like each other, and it's starting to kind of get into a greater frequency. And we say, well, I'm looking for this kind of thing, I'm looking for that kind of thing. And we kind of make these agreements and we go at it that way. But should we also have almost like a prenup where we say, well,
Uh,
what happens in the event that in the future we might want to shift the level of intimacy or commitment? How are we going to go about that? Should we invite that conversation as well so that we could already have this awareness to it?
yeah. Well, I like that idea. So what kinds of things are there things that you think that you could talk about in advance? Sorry, I'm shaking
Hmm.
shaking the table.
Yes, well, I'm thinking, if it were to go that way, how would we ever introduce it, and what would the implications be? Because I think right now, if I were in a relationship with somebody and they said, "Well, I'm thinking that maybe I'd like to step back a little bit, or I want to modify the relationship," my initial feeling would probably be that, "Well, is there something that I might have done wrong, or were you not feeling enough
Hmm.
of a certain thing?"
Hmm.
And I would probably internalize that, but it might also be a very natural course that these new relationship energies drive us to want to have this great intense thing, but after time it might kind of subside a little bit, and maybe the natural course is that we would want to change the level of commitment or intimacy. So if we have the awareness of it and we talk about it prior, would it make it easier to kind of shift lanes and make those changes without it feeling so personalized?
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to get into the sort of the 7 things to work on in a relationship, but like where relationship reviews and check-ins come in, right? Because if
Mhm.
you're continuously checking in, there's opportunities to talk about what's working, what's not working, if you'd like things change, without having the like, oh my God, I have to have this conversation. If you have a regularly scheduled time, then maybe it's something you know it's easier to approach it. So
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. Yeah, if we are in the habit of kind of doing these check-ins and seeing where we're at and addressing whatever might be coming up, maybe we don't feel as though we have to kind of say, okay, well, that's it. Like, I'm out of here and, I'm making a cut. Maybe it can make it easier to modify the relationship and increase what's working and maybe de-escalate what's not working as much.
Yeah. So when people decide to de-escalate, it could be for a number of reasons. It can be because of what they feel are shortcomings in the relationship or incompatibility or something else. And I don't think it has to be a bad thing. Like you said earlier, it can be a natural progression to where the relation was meant to be. And, as I mentioned also earlier, I think this is one of the parts of polyamory that's kind of cool, is that we have the ability, well, some people, if you're doing it, I think, in a ethically open, consensual way, of looking at relationships differently, and that they don't need to be one specific thing, and that you can have different relationships with different people. Just like we have friendships and relationships with our parents that are different, we can have different relationships with people that we were in more emotional, intimate, or sexually intimate relationships with. They don't all have to be a very prescribed thing that's going in a very prescribed way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So being polyamorous, being open in this way, it really does lend itself to so many different varieties, right? It's not the kind of, one-on-one contractual relationship that monogamy often subscribes to. There are different flavors to this. And you really hit it there. It's when it's consensual. Right? We talk about these things and we find out, is it going to work for each other? So in my case, for example, I was in a relationship with somebody and we were had the trappings of all of the traditional kind of relationships, I guess you'd say. But then at one point, when we started to open up our relationship, my partner said that they were not feeling comfortable with the idea of being sexual with other people, even though we were still very much emotionally connected. So we had a discussion about becoming asexual in our relationship, but we still maintained a very strong love connection. And, thinking about it, in some ways, when we did remove the sexual part of it, we had to find other ways to demonstrate our love, and the emotional bonds became perhaps even closer. It's not to say that it could not have been otherwise, or that it's going to automatically happen, but for us, because we talked about it so openly, it really did allow for that expression as well. So it was actually, in a sense, a loss on one side, but a gain on the other side.
Yeah, and that relationship is still very, very strong now, and you consider that person your other primary relationship, if you want to label it in some way.
Very strong. In fact, I'm nesting with them at the moment. It is very strong till to this day.
Yeah, which is awesome. So
it sure is.
So then some people may asking themselves, like, is it time to de-escalate a relationship? So I think, as we always do, Andre, we always say, let's do some thinking about it. Ask yourself the question, like, what's driving this feeling of wanting to either break up or de-escalate? So
absolutely. I want to. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's always a fantastic question to ask ourselves, right? Is what's driving these feelings? What's my motive behind this, right? So we might have the initial feeling, but what's behind that feeling? Sometimes there's a secondary gain to it. But what is at play? What is going on that's making me consider this? So is it that there's something perhaps that's not working so well in the relationship, or is it something more about myself and questions of intimacy or avoidance? What is going on? So we can ask ourselves that and become informed, so then we can really make an informed decision about what we're wanting and where we should be going with it.
So some examples of things that might be driving the feeling. So it could feel like the relationship is just too much work or too hard. It may feel like conversations turning into arguments. Maybe you're not able to agree on certain things in the relationship, like how they're going to work. So there may be things that are non-negotiable for one person, but the other person can't agree to that. Like there's an alignment on it. So it's hard to make a particular agreement on that particular matter. There could be broken rules or boundaries, which is like, these are some of the serious things I'm listing now that might cause you to rethink it. You might have different interests, so sexual or non-sexual, needs not being met, bored, lonely.
Feeling more like friends than lovers, right?
Yeah.
And feeling, experiencing more excitement and NRE with others. So maybe our focus or attention changes, our excitement towards each other changes, and that might shift over time.
Yeah. It could be a logistics thing, like people are just too far away. You're not able to see them in person, and you're having a hard time staying connected. You might want to continue to love the person and have a strong emotional connection, but not necessarily a sexual one, like you said.
Or vice versa, right? We might want to maintain the sexual one, but not want to have such an emotional connection. Sometimes it might feel as though it's taxing to us psychically to be in that thing. We might want to shift that.
Exactly. So some of these things may signal that a breakup is necessary. Like, like sometimes, we don't want to do that thing, but if truly inside ourselves we feel that someone's continuously ignoring our boundaries, we've made efforts and that sort of thing to talk to them about it, and it's just not working out for us, or if there's anything like abuse or anything like that, or even if we feel like we can't be a full person in that relationship, it might be the time to break up. But some of these things are things there might be an opportunity to make a change or to dig in and revive things. So like lack of communication or ongoing arguments, jealousy, insecurity. Like if you're just opening up a relationship and then you're hit with all these things and all of a sudden it seems like you can't talk to each other again, and this happens to people.
Yeah.
And,
so,
maybe there's things to work on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, on one extreme, it is going all the way to breaking up and severing all the ties with the person and saying, well, I want nothing to do with them because it just seems as though our needs aren't being met or it's just too demanding, too taxing. But before we get to that point, are we able to look at some of the things, like you said, like jealousy or arguments, communication, and find out what's at play and how might we address them? Because maybe we don't have to blow the whole thing up. Maybe we can modify it. Maybe we can explore it and come to different feelings, different understandings about it, where we are able and wanting to maintain the relationship, even if it's going to be modified. Or maybe we find ways of even strengthening it beyond what we have now.
For some people, and I hate to say this because but it's the very act of opening a relationship causes a huge break in it, and then it calls into question sometimes things that you thought you were good at, like I said, like communication. But if that's the case, like I feel like my personal view is that it's always good to make an effort to try. Like if you still have feelings for the person, you still care for the person, but there's some things that just feel like they're not working out right. I personally like to go for the let's try and see if the other person's willing, right? And there's still feelings there. So,
I think you're absolutely correct, because initially we were drawn to each other for whatever reason. And what happened to those reasons? Are they still valid? So maybe they're still valid, but we find out, well, I still like all of these other traits about the person, but we're not communicating so well. We don't really see eye to eye. And then we go to something like attunement communication, right? We learn how to communicate more effectively, more openly and honestly. And that in itself could already have a huge impact on how we relate with each other.
Yeah. I mean, these are there's seven, we have 7 foundational things that are in our program, Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery. And they're the foundational things for a reason, because they are the things that, create a successful open or polyamorous relationship. And you may not realize that you didn't have these things until you open a relationship and maybe something happens. So attunement communication, it's always our number one thing, Andre?
Communication. It's all about communication. Yeah. So the better apt you are at communicating, the better your relationships are going to be, whether it is about romantic relationships or work relationships. But attunement communication is one of the foundations to having successful relationships.
Yeah. And one of the other things that comes up for people commonly and that you can address is understanding your attachment style and how it's impacting your relationship. Because you may not have noticed it when you're monogamous, because the very fact of being monogamous creates a bit of a logistical, secure attachment. I'm going to put it in quotations because it always doesn't. But if you understand how it's impacting your relationship, you have the ability to build stronger attachment within yourself and in your relationship. So that's that's number 2.
And the next one that's of such importance is overcoming our feelings of jealousy and building that security, right? Finding ways that we can not feel as though the jealousy is the biggest part of a relationship, but right-sizing it and finding out how we are able to not only survive it, but again, minimize its impact on us. We might still always feel some degree of jealousy,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be this big monster that we feel powerless over.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part of this is like, what is your relationship going to look like? So we call it the relationship blueprint, because I think that's one of the things that when people open a relationship, particularly if you're opening a relationship, is like you're going like, okay, we're going to do this thing. Maybe we're going to have some threesomes and, have all this sexy fun, but we're not really talking about exactly the details of how it's going to work. And I think that's the part where things start to go sideways, is when there's assumptions made, you don't know what you want. So part of what we do after we work on some of those other things is we develop that relationship blueprint so that you're co-creating with your partner and partners the type of relationship you want, at least from a starting point. And then, you can develop it as you go, but agreeing on what that's going to be and what does it look like and feel like and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. It is so helpful to have that those agreements in place, and that also leads itself into the other part of understanding what our personal boundaries are and communicating that and establishing and co-creating our value-based agreements, right?
Yeah, because those are the things that are going to help you in implementing that blueprint. So knowing what your boundaries are so they don't get crossed, each of yours, and then, creating agreement around the things that you value in your relationship so you know what to say and do to uphold those values in your relationship.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but some people have a very difficult time expressing their personal boundaries, but we do help you to find ways of recognizing what they are, establishing them, and then communicating them to others, and also how to recognize other people's boundaries and honor them and maintain them.
Yeah. I love that part of our Training the Boundaries one. I think it's super awesome. I mean, I know when we created it, I started looking at my own boundaries and things that I find more difficult to announce and acknowledge, and have gotten much better at it. And it feels like at first sometimes it's hard to express your boundaries, but when you do, people want, I like to go with the belief that people want to respect our boundaries and don't want to cross them. And so if you think that way as a starting point, then you're more likely to feel more comfortable expressing them.
But also when I'm with somebody and they announce their boundaries, it helps make me feel more secure, because then I know what it is they're wanting and not wanting, as opposed to it being, well, I'm not sure how they feel about this, or how, whatever it is. So making good boundaries makes for good neighbors, and it helps us to know what it is, and that creates a feeling of security. But it also goes back to the earlier part about, does the relationship feel like it's too much work? And initially it might feel like, oh my God, this is so much work being in this, is it even worth it? But it does get easier over time. So the more acquainted we are with announcing our boundaries, the easier it gets over time. It's kind of like when we first bring up the topic of STI testing. In the beginning, it was rather foreign and seemed kind of awkward. And now I say it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way, and people seem to respond quite well to it. So it gets easier with time the more we practice this.
Yeah, exactly. And then so the other part of the foundational parts are also spending time to build and maintain connection and grow it within your relationship. Because I think that's something that gets put aside sometimes when we start to have relationships with other people. We're not sort of nurturing our other relationships, because we get into the new relationship energy in that. And then the last part, as we talked about, is doing those relationship reviews and check-ins. And we have a whole process that we teach people in the program, but those are super important. Okay. So those are the things if you want to dig in and let's work on it. But let's go back. If people want to know more about our program, just drop us a chat line in a chat or comment here, and we'll reach out and we can talk to you about it because it's going now, and we're happy to have you in it. So, all right, let's go back to de-escalation though. So if you decide it's time to de-escalate rather than break up, what do you do? How do you do it successfully?
Well, we figure out what we want, right?
Exactly.
So the most common is moving from lovers to friends, but we could also have parents to co-parenting. We could have partners to roommates, romantic and sexual partners to only friends with benefit partners. There's a whole bunch of different choices. We may no longer having kink dynamic on top of friendship, or a sexual romantic relationship, and redefining boundaries there.
Yeah. So we may go from,
No, after you.
we may go from nesting together to not living together. You can maintain the emotional and the sexual and all the other aspects of a relationship, but just decide that living together is not a thing.
Well, you and I have done that, and I've done that with my primary
Mhm.
partner as well. So you and I, we both had this idea, understanding that we did not want to live together, and then through a series of mishap adventures, right, the flood in your place, for example, we ended up cohabitating. We were nesting together, but then said, well, it's not really where we wanted to be, but we did it because it was necessary, it was practical, it worked. But then we said, well, it's not really working. It's not our ideal. We still like our autonomy. We still like all the practical things, and we will kind of, in a sense, de-escalate that. So we went from nesting to occasional nesting, and that's how it is with my other partner. We were at one point living together as well, and we said, no, it's going to be modified, and we did do that successfully, and we've maintained our loving relationships.
Yeah, I remember like after the flood and when you were looking for, you decided you didn't want to rent an apartment again. So we were looking for a place to live and we had been living together. And I totally remember the conversation like in my mind having to have with you because we even put an offer on a place, remember? A
Yeah,
beautiful
actually, yeah.
place, but it required me to sell my place in order to help fund it because it was, you know, it wasn't a cheap place. It was gorgeous and it would have had a lot of space. But I remember having this moment where I was like, this is not, I don't want to sell my place. I still want to have my place. Like I love you and I want to spend time with you. I want to nest with you part of the time, but I don't want to do it 24/7. And I remember having the conversation with you and I was, or leading up to it, feeling so like scared to have that conversation and then having it. And then you were like, yeah, I don't think I want that either. And thankfully we didn't get that place. We didn't have
But
the winning offer.
But I must admit that my initial response to you saying you didn't want to live with me, I was taken back a little bit, and I personalized and thought it was about me. But then I realized, well, no, it's not about me. It was your preference, right? So we could still, go beyond having to personalize it and recognize what it is that the other person's wanting and not wanting. And then in the end, I came to realize that, well, actually, I don't want that either. And we're able to still maintain a wonderful, loving relationship regardless of that.
Yeah.
So
And
we can survive these modifications. We can survive these changing relationships.
yeah, it doesn't have to mean it doesn't have to mean anything more than just not wanting to cohabitate at the same time. You know, and we have that ongoing conversation because our places are so far apart distance wise, we end up staying together and we do have those conversations like, is it time for me to go? Do you need to have more space? Do I need to have more space? And I think it's great. Like that's where that awesome communication, the two-way communication has really helped. So anyway, that's a big one I think people have a hard time with in terms of de-escalation is that living together to not living together. So
right. And a lot of people they might do it that kind of sort of uncoupling to gain greater autonomy, right?
yeah.
So they might feel as though, and I felt like this sometimes in our relationship, that I love spending time with you, but then all of a sudden I find that I'm in a kind of mono model, and sort of little things about myself have kind of gone by the wayside, and I'm less autonomous. So I can remain connected to you, but still maintain my autonomy. And there are ways to do that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then we talked about this one already, but you may decide part of your de-escalation is to remove the sexual aspects, but maintain the emotional aspects. Okay. So some of these things are things that maybe you're going like, that sounds good to me. So then what do you do? So what do we always say? Somebody in the chat.
We say it 3 times. We communicate.
Yes, communicate, communicate, communicate. So this can be the tough part, right? Because if you're the one that's initiating it, and if you haven't been having regular check-ins or have opportunities to have these kind of conversations, then I think we need to be gentle with the people that we're with, right? And be thoughtful about how we approach our partners and also being proactive about it. You know what I mean? And not waiting. And so while it may seem like a hard, oh, the dog's under here. I just heard a snore. Did you hear it?
No.
Oh, that's so funny. It scared me. So, rather than keeping it in, right? I think sometimes we're afraid of hurting the person, and then we don't, like with lots of conversations, right? And then we hold it in and we don't tell them. That's actually hurting them more.
Sure.
So, finding your time, but also being proactive about it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it's interesting, right? When we shift the relationship, so we might be seeing each other and then say, hey, maybe we want to move in together, and that somehow feels as though it's a so-called positive step. But then if we want to de-nest, is that seen as a negative? So is it harder to introduce those subjects? So it's okay to move in, but it's less okay to move out. Whereas maybe we are nesting with each other, just as an example, and then we find out, well, it's not working quite as well, but maybe we would do well not nesting together. And rather than seeing it as a negative, could it also be seen as a positive? We de-nested and still have a very good, loving, close relationship. So you can modify it without it being a so-called negative, right? It might actually, in fact, be a better thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it is. I think, especially if you've gotten into a relationship, sorry, kick the dog by accident. Especially if you've gotten into a relationship in your older years and, you're used to living by yourself and doing your own thing and that sort of thing. Living together might not be the natural progression for you. You may need your time alone. I like my time alone. You like your time alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it also offers other opportunities that align with being polyamorous, like seeing
Mm-hmm.
other people and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but even if we are nesting with each other, for example, we can still find ways of reclaiming our autonomy if we feel as though it's lacking. Or we can still find ways of asking for and getting or granting space with each other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be an indication of our wanting to reject the other person or being rejected by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so curious if anybody who's listening or in live or in the replay has ever done this, where they've gone from living together to not living together.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of the couples I worked with, there was a point at which the one person thought that they might not want to live together. Like they had a big family with kids and that sort of thing, but they were feeling a little crowded in the household. Now they made a different decision later, but we did talk about what it would be like for them and what they would like about not living with their husband versus living with them, and what that might look like, how they would feel, what opportunities it would bring. So, these are the kinds of things to think about if, you're trying to de-escalate a relationship. Like, what is it going to look like? How do I want it to play out? And so then when you have the conversations with your partner, you can do the last thing, which is then co-create the relationship you desire.
And make our own relationship style, right? Because like you were saying about, perhaps if we have children, we might have this automatic default setting. Well, that means we automatically live together.
Yeah.
And, who's to say that we couldn't still be loving co-parenting people with different domiciles, right? So we can create any kind of relationship we want. We are not handed this blueprint that's written in stone that's automatic. We can decide for ourselves what we want it to be.
Exactly. Okay. I think we actually kept it pretty short today, Andre. So,
how interesting.
So if anyone who's listening is trying to decide if it's time to call it quits or de-escalate or dig in, work on things, then definitely reach out to chat with us. We love to help. And I say that, with complete honesty and love and support, because I really do. I think sometimes people think like it's an inconvenience to book a call with me, you know what I mean, or with us. And we do love to talk to people and support you and get you to like sort of the next steps. So you can send a Facebook message and we can chat and set something up and talk there. You can also book a relationship rescue with call with me. It's completely free. I'll drop the link after the chat. It's basically 45 minutes. We talk about what's going on in your life, and then we make sure you leave with an action plan of next steps that you can do on your own. Or if you'd like additional help to get you there faster, obviously we are here to help you do that. We've helped lots of people and do that, and love to see people be successful in their polyamorous relationships. So yeah.
Awesome.
Happy Monday and day before my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. you. Yes, if anyone has any questions or comments, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, have a happy Monday.
Happy Monday.